Before we start, I just want to say I know how this is going to look, but please don't judge me. Not unless you've walked in my shoes. I'd been laid off from my job as a server for a couple of weeks. I'd been looking for work, but no luck. And when you live paycheck to paycheck, a couple of weeks without a job may as well be a lifetime. Felt like things just started to snowball after that. Every day, I'd wake up with a tightness in my chest, a sense of doom and dread. Didn't look like I was going to be able to pay my rent, not unless there was some kind of miracle. And guess what? Miracles just don't happen for women like me. I was talking to my best friend Lisa about things. She was a server like I was, but at a much nicer restaurant. She got all tentative and then told me she may have a solution, a way out. I thought she was going to loan me some money, but that wasn't what Lisa had in mind. Lisa dressed well, and lately she always picked up the check when we went out. I thought she was making lots of money in tips. But now, Lisa was ready to tell me the truth. She'd signed up with an app that matches sugar babies with sugar daddies, attractive women with generous men, usually older. My jaw dropped. I'd had no idea. Lisa said she never told me because she thought I would judge her. But now that she saw how desperate I was, she wanted to help. I was polite to Lisa. I thanked her for sharing, but I just didn't think being a sugar baby for some old rich guy was something I could do. Anyway, days turned into sleepless nights. The anxiety kept me awake. I didn't know what to do or where to turn. Anxiety turned into panic. When it got really bad, it was hard for me to breathe. The walls of my apartment seemed to close in on me. It was like being in a prison. I felt suffocated, desperate for a way out. And so, I checked out the app. I didn't feel like I had any other choice. It wasn't as bad as I thought. A lot of the men were pretty hot, in a mature kind of way. And I'd been on Tinder. This was the same thing. Only the men were richer and I'd get some cash. Okay, so yeah, I was definitely trying to rationalize it. But you have to understand, I felt cornered. No other options in sight. With trembling fingers, I clicked the link. My heart pounded in my chest as I took the first step down a path I never thought I would consider. Desperation had driven me to this point, and I could only hope it would lead to a way out. The app was full of pics of happy, gorgeous people, fancy trips, shiny jewelry. I felt a mix of jealousy and hope. Could this be the answer to my prayers? I made a profile, picking my best pics to show off. Messages started flooding in right away. Most were gross and all about money. Made my skin crawl. But I guess that makes me some kind of hypocrite, right? 'Cause money is the only reason why I was using that app to begin with. Then I saw him. His name was Mark. His profile pic showed a good-looking guy with kind eyes and a warm smile. He wasn't pushy or full of himself like the others. He talked about wanting companionship, about wanting to find someone he could pamper and care for, someone to put on a pedestal. Not gonna lie, I liked the sound of that. We messaged back and forth. He was funny, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in me. He offered to help with my money problems. I was excited, but a little bit scared. But I knew I couldn't let this drag on too long before taking it to the next level. Rent was almost due. Hope started to grow in my chest. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. My phone vibrated with a text message from Mark. Dinner at my place tonight, 8 p.m.? He sent his address. I punched it into my GPS. It was farther than I expected, out in the suburbs. Doubt gnawed at me. Was this a mistake? I barely knew this man. An hour later, I was driving through dark, winding roads. Mark's neighborhood was nice. Tree-lined streets, older homes. Finally, I reached the address Mark had sent. It was a modest 2-story with, I kid you not, a white picket fence. Sure, it was a nice home, but I guess I had some fantasy of him living in a mansion. Like I said, nice home, but not a mansion. Disappointment washed over me. This wasn't the luxurious lifestyle I'd imagined. But hey, it was a lot better than the crappy studio apartment I lived in. So who was I to judge? I hesitated at the front door, my finger hovering over the doorbell. Maybe I should just leave, but before I could turn back, the door swung open. Mark stood in the doorway. He was even more handsome in person. His eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "Sarah, you made it. Come in, it's freezing out here." His voice was warm and reassuring, erasing my doubts. The inside of the house was surprisingly cozy. A fire crackled in the fireplace, casting a warm glow on the room. The scent of something delicious wafted from the kitchen. Mark settled into the sofa, invited me to sit down, and the way he looked at me, it felt like we'd known each other all our lives. We talked for hours, lost in the rhythm of each other's company. It was getting late, but we hardly noticed. Our conversation flowed effortlessly, touching on everything from our childhood memories to our favorite books and movies. Mark listened intently as I spoke about my job loss and the uncertainty that lay ahead. He nodded sympathetically, his eyes never leaving my face, offering silent support. I opened up about my dreams, my anxieties, and the fears that kept me awake at night. It was a rare moment of vulnerability, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders as I shared my innermost thoughts. He seemed genuinely interested, making me feel comfortable and understood. He opened up too, confessed that he was a horror geek, said his favorite movie was Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He said he probably shouldn't have told me that. He was worried it made him look like some bloodthirsty weirdo. I laughed and said I love horror too. He spoke passionately about his work as a building contractor. He helped clients renovate their houses, showed me photos on his phone of some of his projects. They were pretty cool. He showed me photos on his phone of vacations he'd taken to places like Portugal and Costa Rica. He said he hoped he'd have the pleasure of taking me with him on his next trip. As he stared into my eyes, I felt a tingle of excitement and anticipation. Mark went to the kitchen and came back with a glass of wine and some napkins. He apologized for not having offered me something to drink earlier. He said he'd gotten lost in our conversation. Suddenly, the phone rang, shattering the intimate atmosphere we had created. The sound was jarring, pulling us back to reality. Mark excused himself and stepped into the next room to take the call, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I took a sip of my wine, my hand trembling slightly. The sudden interruption had left me feeling unsettled. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. As I brought the glass back to the coffee table that was next to the couch, I tried to steady my nerves, but in my anxious state, my hand bumped against it. The glass toppled over, spilling red wine all over the pristine white rug. "Oh no!" I gasped, my heart pounding in my chest. My mind raced as I stared at the spreading stain, feeling a surge of panic. I grabbed a handful of napkins, my movements frantic and desperate. I pressed them against the stain, trying to soak up the wine, but it only seemed to spread further. The crimson liquid seeped into the fibers like blood from a gaping knife wound, creating an even larger blotch on the once perfect surface. A crimson stain on the perfect facade, a stark reminder of how quickly things could go wrong. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness washed over me. My vision blurred. I felt strangely lightheaded. What was happening? I tried to stand, but my legs felt like jelly. My head was spinning. The room tilted like I was in a carnival funhouse. I glanced at the empty wine glass, a terrifying thought creeping into my mind. Had he put something in my drink? But why would he do that? We were getting along great. Through my hazy vision, I saw Mark returning. Panic surged through me. I had to think fast. I looked at the wine stain on the rug. I'd spilled most of it, so maybe it wouldn't have the effect he was hoping for. Maybe I'd be able to escape. But I had to think fast. Maybe if I pretended to be unconscious, I could attack him when he got really close, then make a run for it. Take him by surprise. So I crumpled to the couch, feigning unconsciousness. "Sarah? Sarah, are you okay?" He lifted my arm to see if I was completely out. I let my arm fall from his grip like I was a corpse. I held my breath, keeping my eyes tightly shut. "Please don't let him know I'm awake," I prayed silently. I opened my eyes just a crack, just enough to see him without him knowing I was awake. The room swam back into focus. I kept my body still. Mark grabbed the coffee table that was next to the couch I was on. He moved it out of the way. He opened a large cupboard in a corner of the living room, took out a huge roll of plastic. He spread the plastic all over the rug where the coffee table was. A chill ran down my spine. What was that plastic for? Was it to prevent blood from ruining his rug? My blood? Mark disappeared into the kitchen. Silence. Then a low rumble growing louder by the second. It was a mechanical sound, grating and terrifying. Recognition dawned on me. A chainsaw. My eyes flew open. I had to get out of there. Now! Adrenaline surged through me, banishing the last traces of the drug. I scrambled to my feet, stumbling over the rug, slipping on the plastic. The chainsaw roared to life, closer now. Mark emerged from the kitchen. His eyes were black as night, his face twisted in a cruel sneer. Panic lent me a burst of superhuman strength. I didn't look back. I didn't scream. I just ran. I threw open the front door and raced into the night. The cold air hit me like a slap, clearing my head. I fumbled with my car keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the lock. The roar of the chainsaw was deafening now, closer than I dared to imagine. He was right behind me. I threw the car in reverse, tires screeching as I sped away from the house, from the nightmare. The taillights of my car disappeared into the darkness, leaving the chainsaw's chilling whine echoing in the night. I didn't stop driving until I reached the familiar streets of my neighborhood. My heart was still pounding, each beat a reminder of the narrow escape I had just experienced. I pulled over, my body still trembling with adrenaline and fear. The events of the evening replayed in my mind, each moment more terrifying than the last. I had trusted Mark, believed his promises, and I almost paid the ultimate price for my naivety. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I could still hear the roar of the chainsaw in my ears, see the look in Mark's eyes. It was a look of pure evil, a look that told me I was nothing more than a pawn in his twisted game, a piece of meat to be carved up for his pleasure, like a rump roast on a butcher's block. I had been so desperate, desperate for an angel, but what I got was the devil himself, a devil who wanted to rip me apart and slice me up from limb to limb. But guess what? I was stronger. Stronger than I thought I was, strong enough to escape. And if I could find a way out of that mess, I could find a way out of anything. With trembling fingers, I pulled out my phone and deleted my profile on the Sugar Baby app. The screen seemed to mock me with its promise of easy money and a luxurious life. It was a lie, a dangerous lie that had almost cost me everything. Listen, I've got nothing against sugar babies. Seems to be working out okay for Lisa, right? But it's like my dad always says, there's no free lunch. Everything has a price. And given everything that happened, I guess I've been given a sign that the sugar baby lifestyle is not for me. I didn't go straight home that night. I went straight to the police and told them what happened with Mark. It was embarrassing for me to admit how we met, but I wanted to prevent him from attacking another woman. No one, and I mean no one, deserves to have someone come at them with a chainsaw. So they arrested him, put him in cuffs, and locked him up in a jail cell where he belongs. And the police told me later on that there was evidence at his house that showed I wasn't the first woman he'd attacked, but I was likely the only one who'd lived to tell the tale. I felt so grateful to be alive. In case you're wondering, yes, I got another job as a server just a couple of days after what happened with Mark. Life had scared the heck out of me and thrown me for a loop. But I got back on the horse. Stronger than before. Strong enough to make it on my own. And it's weird, but I have a confidence I didn't have before this all happened. I know if I can survive some creepy sugar daddy wannabe with a chainsaw, I can survive anything.